Hi folks, I'm in Montreal covering some of the sites that connect to MK Ultra and indirectly to Rockefeller. Well, I should say directly to Rockefellers and the Kennedy assassination. You see on my camera here, you'll see this building, this tall building here. It's the tallest building in Montreal. Probably the biggest building in Montreal. It was built by an American, a New Yorker named Bill Zeckendorf, who was the Rockefellers' Manhattan real estate broker. And Zeckendorf were able to get the land, acquire the land for the Rockefellers. The piece of land where Rockefellers built their World Chase headquarters, which is One Chase Plaza down in the financial district of New York City. But he has another interesting history with the Rockefellers. It was Bill Zeckendorf, Lawrence Rockefeller, Nelson's brother. Nelson was very close to Lawrence, and Lawrence ran the military-industrial complex for the Rockefellers. And Aristotle Onassis, the shipping magnate, who married JFK's widow, Jacqueline Kennedy. He married her 4 years after JFK was assassinated. And she met him, and they met each other, shortly before the president was killed. And she met him through her sister, Carolyn Lee Radziwill. Princess Carolyn Lee. She's known by Princess Carolyn Lee. She was Jackie's sister. And Princess Lee, she wasn't a princess then, but she took Jacqueline on board Onassis' yacht. Lee was friends with Onassis. Well, maybe Onassis fell in love with her. You know, Jacqueline Kennedy should have been seriously questioned about a possible role in the Kennedy assassination. And I'm saying she was, but there was an awful lot of evidence to suggest she was. She was well acquainted with Oswald's best friend, George Morenci, who sometimes I call Uncle George. She was an uncle. He was an uncle to Jacqueline Kennedy, a name. The two became acquainted with each other. She was 10 years old. He was a few years much older. And she dubbed him Uncle George. And he was in contact with her right up until the day her husband was assassinated through their foundation. George and his ex-wife set up the foundation for cystic fibrosis, and Jacqueline was the honorary director of it. I mean, the first lady, Jacqueline. Doesn't that strike you odd? Doesn't that strike you very suspicious? Oswald's best friend, George Morenci, would be hobnobbing with the first lady. And then, she meets this guy, Onassis, 2 weeks before just a few weeks before the assassination. Well, the story was she lost that child. And I'm dating myself. I remember that was in the news. She lost the child, Patrick. And she went to Europe to be with her sister to heal. So I'm not saying Jackie was involved in killing her, but she was never questioned. Well, all the people when a husband is killed, who becomes the lead suspect? The widow. It's called routine police investigation. All the people who had the motives to kill JFK were never questioned. Nelson Rockefeller, because he was the leading candidate in the 1964 election for the White House. Lyndon Johnson, who gained by Kennedy's death. And Jacqueline Kennedy, of course Jimmy Hoffa too. And Jack Ruby was well connected with people in the Teamsters Union. That was all ignored by the Warren Commission. But anyways, getting back to this building, man, Bill Zucker, I'm going to forget his name. Zeckendorf, Lawrence Rockefeller, and Aristotle and Assas. They formed an aviation. They were going to buy, they made an offer to Howard Hughes to buy TWA from Howard Hughes, Trans World Airlines. Apparently the deal fell through. See, the Rockefellers are organizing a aviation oligarchy. This is the birth of, you're okay. This was the birth of aviation. And the Rockefellers, Buckeye Pipeline, they were supplying all the airports with fuel. They had underground pipelines coming into all these airports, and they were coming in, they were accessing these airports through abandoned railroad beds and railroad right-of-ways and things. So they were forming this aviation oligarchy. It was all new technology. And of course, the Rockefellers owned Eastern Airlines, which is headquartered at 10 Rockefeller Plaza. And Lawrence was chairman of the board of that. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Gore Vidal. His father was involved in it too. And there's a family relation there with Jacqueline Kennedy. I don't need to get into that now. But here's the thing. Two things I got to talk about here. Eastern Airlines, Jesuit wannabe priest David Ferry, who was indicted for the Kennedy for conspiracy to kill President Kennedy by District Attorney Jim Garrison in New Orleans. He was a pilot for Eastern Airlines until he got canned for sodomy with a young man. I should use the word fired, in case you know what can mean. Well, here's the thing about Howard Hughes. Oh yeah, David Ferry, he never stood trial because he was found dead only within hours after his release from custody. His release on bail. And David Ferry was well acquainted with Clay Shaw, and Clay Shaw worked in Rockefeller Center at the Vanderbilt Theater, but not back in the 30s, the Vanderbilt Theater was pretty much run by NBC, which was headquartered where? Rockefeller Center. They were making radio plays. They were making plays for radio broadcast, and who knows what other nefarious things these people were up to. But I could go on and on and on and on. But Eastern Airlines was headquartered at 10 Rockefeller Plaza, but Eastern Airlines was the airlines of choice for the CIA. All company people were ordered to book flights on Eastern Airlines. But here's the thing about Howard Hughes. Yeah, go ahead. Howard Hughes, of course, ran RKO Movie Company, which was jointly founded by the Rockefellers and Joseph Kennedy Sr., you know that, and it was the first tenant in Rockefeller Center, and they had a RKO movie theater there at one time, was since been demolished. But here's the thing about Howard Hughes. Of course, Howard Hughes also he was multitasker, but his wealth and most of his wealth and his family wealth came out of the oil industry in Texas, oil boom. Texaco Company and other oil companies, and they did a lot of the drilling and developed drilling technology. Hughes Tools, and they were huge in the oil industry. Of course, the Rockefellers, they're the lords of the oil industry. But Hughes wanted to. What happened with Hughes was, and why? Well, okay, the deal with Rockefeller and Bill Zeckendorf and Onassis, Hughes turned the deal down. They wanted to buy TWA. So actually, at the time, Rockefellers had started Pan American Airlines, which also was originally founded in Rockefeller Center, but then they built the Pan Am building. The Rockefellers built the Pan Am building. Well, that had a lot to do with William Rockefeller, John Rockefeller's brother. But Rockefellers were building an aviation oligarchy, so they wanted Hughes to TWA. Well, the deal fell through, but here's the thing. Hughes did sell the TWA. He did sell it, Trans World Airlines. He did sell it. But why did he sell it? He sold it to buy Las Vegas, essentially. Here was casinos run pretty much nefarious. We don't even know who owned them. Nefarious gangsters, a collection of nefarious gangsters and people. I could get into a huge story on that. about what they call the juice and what was going on and all that stuff in the history of Las Vegas. I'm not going to get into that. But with Howard Hughes, he made his big money. He made $6 billion in cost-plus non-competitive bid contracts from the CIA, mostly. Some from the Army, but mostly from the CIA. Doing contract work for the CIA. Now, what I mean by non-competitive bid, he didn't have to bid any contracts. They were all blocked out, and they were cost-plus. All he had to do was send a bill to the government, and the government paid it. $6 billion, that was a lot. That was a lot back in the 60s. They also included, he built that ship Glomar to bring up a Russian sub from the bottom of the ocean. That sank. That was some of that history with Hughes. But here's the thing that's going on in Washington, D.C. There's a 10% kickback. It's in the news today. It's a 10% kickback. Any contracts that these politicians sign on to, they expect a 10% kickback. Okay. Bobby Kennedy, this was written about in Bobby Kennedy's The Enemy Within. Bobby, page 6, talked about going after the Italian crime boss, Albert Anastasia, and that's why part of the reason Kennedys were killed. But what these Italian crime bosses were in the pay of the Rockefellers and the Assers and the Vanderbilts. But that's another story. I'm not going to get into that now. I want to talk about this 10% kickback. See, if you remember Watergate was ordered by Nelson Rockefeller to destroy the presidential hopes of Ted Kennedy and Kennedy brother-in-law, Sergeant Shriver. Don't forget, Sergeant Shriver ran as vice president on the ticket with McGovern. So stranger things can happen, you know. Suppose they got elected and McGovern died, then you'd have a Kennedys right back in the White House again. So that's what that was all about. That's what Watergate was, one episode of a massive espionage, political espionage operation to destroy the third brother. See, they killed Jan, then they killed Robert when Robert was speeding to the White House. Then they had to worry about Ted, Senator Ted. See, so Watergate was all about destroying Ted Kennedy's presidential hopes, and also Sergeant Shriver, Kennedy brother-in-law. He ran as vice president in 72 on the ticket with McGovern. Well, stranger things can happen. Nelson Rockefeller doesn't have a crystal ball. But if you know the story, the committee to re-elect the president was collecting garbage full of cans of cash. Much of it came from Standard Oil Corporation, now Exxon. Okay, they financed the Watergate breakaway, but Howard Hughes did too. Because a lot of money, Gordon Liddy was flying out to the casinos in Vegas and picking up bales of money and bringing it back to Washington. I'm talking cash here, and dumping it into these garbage cans that the committee to re-elect the president. That president, of course, Nixon. So these people financed the Watergate break-in. The $100 bills. But here's the thing. Hughes earned $6 billion in contracts from the CIA. All right. What's 10% of $6 billion? $600 million? Am I doing the math? Am I moving my decimal point right? Yeah, it would be something like $600 million in kickbacks to Washington Power. See, that's why he bought Las Vegas. It was a cash cow. It was a cash business. See, the talk on the streets was he was losing money on the casinos. He didn't know how to run casinos. Well, he had gangsters helping him do it, but they were losing money. Well, you know why? Because they were taking all the money back to Washington. And he was making more money doing contract work for the CIA. These are the reasons Kennedy died, folks. These are the reasons Kennedy's died. Bobby Kennedy was unearthing digging up all these dead skeletons, and all these secret things going on. But anyways, then again, let me summarize. This building, tallest building in Montreal, built by Bill Zeckendorf, Rockefeller real estate broker in Manhattan, who put together a consortium with Lawrence Rockefeller and Aristotle Onassis, maritime shipping magnate who moved petroleum in the oil age. And Hughes turned down the deal, of course. They wanted to buy TWA from Hughes. Hughes turned down, they sold it to somebody else and used the money to buy up Las Vegas casinos to skim millions and millions of dollars to take back to Washington, including the Watergate burglary. The story goes on and on, but I wanted being here in New York, being here in Montreal. I see this building. There's a story attached to it, and okay, see you later.